Hi, I'm Adam Searle. Here at LocusHarmony, I want to help you take control of your happiness. That's why in this video I'm discussing opinions and other people being wrong. Okay, so let's dig into that a bit. Quite commonly, what I talk about here is responsibility, the concept of taking responsibility for yourself, your own happiness, understanding what it is that you're doing and that you potentially can do better that is affecting your happiness, understanding that you are in control and really owning that responsibility. If you dig into this idea of responsibility in terms of the topic of this video, which is opinions and other people being wrong, it doesn't even need to be people, sometimes it's systems. For instance, when I was younger, I went through quite a big anti-government phase because it was easy for me to do that. I had, frustrations about the world, and it's so much easier if we can just lump these into, well, it's because this thing is wrong. But I think that there's more to it than that, and that's what I want to talk about here. If at this moment you're at all tense, frustrated, anxious, anything like that, it's almost certainly I would say, maybe you're not aware of it, but it is tied to a story, something that happened, and that might not make sense at first, so I'm going to dig into that. But rather than just being present here and now with that feeling and allowing it to exist and then pass, you're associating a collection of ideas and beliefs and a narrative, if you like, of things that have happened to you as you perceive it and how that is causing this issue. So if that doesn't make sense, try and stick with the video, and it might seem like I'm whining around, which I do when I talk about these things, but hopefully it might, if I give some different examples, get across the point that I'm trying to make there. So Eckhart Tolle talks about pain bodies. If you haven't heard of Eckhart Tolle, you should check him out. He's great. But he uses the term pain bodies to help us to understand kind of energies that we carry with us, or a collection of memories, a collection of pain, basically. And you can think of it as an entity that is kind of existing within us. Now, these pain bodies, in order to survive, they need some kind of sustenance. This is my take on it, with some other, mixing different lessons that I've learned together. But those pain bodies, they need sustenance to survive. And that sustenance is your identification with them. Because without that, there's nowhere for them to exist. And that process of identification is creating an illusory self, if you like, a story of a self. Now, Eckhart Tolle talks about pain bodies, and he gives the example of it being like a sleeping cat, and I think that's really good, because what we want to be able to do is to be able to separate ourselves from these pain bodies. So being able to identify them and understand and witness them is the first step in doing that. So this example of a sleeping cat is great because it makes us see it as something that we can observe rather than what we are. If you think of a sleeping cat, it will be there asleep, and it will be, nothing will seem to disturb it. You can run past it, you can bang pots and pans, depends on the cat to some degree, but all this noise can be going on around it, and it won't wake up. But one little thing, the cat isn't aware it's doing it necessarily, like you're not aware you're doing it, or you're not aware the pain body within you is doing it, but it's waiting and listening, sleeping. And as soon as there's one little thing, so with the cat analogy, maybe that's a sound outside, or a little mouse runs past or something, boom, it's straight away, it's like it's honed in on that thing, and that's its focus. So you can think of that as as a pain body, they work in a similar way. You know, all this stuff can be going on, but it's always there, attentive, waiting for something to trigger it. You can have a conversation with someone and not really be hearing, you know, not be truly listening to them, because instead your pain bodies are reacting, that, you know, something is being triggered in you, and then what comes with that is this emotion. And we tend to identify with that emotion that comes up and accept the story that our mind, the thinking mind, is presenting, without giving ourselves the space just to be present. Now, when pain bodies become active in this way, there's almost a kind of satisfaction in it. Like, if you've ever found yourself in an argument and it's resolved itself, like maybe there was an actual issue that needed to be discussed and you've discussed it, but there's still something that wants to keep going and you'll keep talking. I've done that. That's how I can use that example. I know how that works. But what that satisfaction, where that comes from, is this reassuring ourselves, of this illusory self, this narrative. And you can think of it as, in other words, as an ego. Like you're bigging up, for want of a better term, your ego, and you're making it bigger and feeding the egos, and that there is a satisfaction in that, but it's not a wholesome satisfaction. It's almost like it's a weird, at least in my experience, this kind of frantic energy that always needs to be, validated and reassured. Now, understanding that as an energy and something that we are separate from, we as the observer can witness that taking place. And in a way, once you understand that, you have a choice, which is not to identify with that, not to agree with that, and not let it run you, rather than being run by these pain bodies. And you can use the analogy of a program. You can just choose to let that come up, and if you don't give it energy, it will fade away again. And it might be that it comes up and you don't react to it. You just stay present, you just observe, and then it comes back again later, and you're like, what? Why has this come back? I didn't even want to think about this. It kind of exists as much as you have fed it in the past, in some regards. So if it's something that's been with you for a long time, it will keep resurfacing. But every time you do that if you like, it's like a piece of it that's being peeled off. And rather than giving it more energy so that it just keeps going and going, once you begin this process of observation, it lets that, it reverses the process, so to speak. So rather than rolling in one direction, now these things are starting to come up, and sometimes that process is not easy to go through, but I think it is a way to really unlock true happiness and something deeper as well. So to tie this back in with the topic of the video, well, the reason I wanted to make this video really was because I've noticed something in myself. I have understood, if you like, something recently that I feel like is worth sharing, and something that helps me with this process of remaining present. And it's understanding that these pain bodies, or the ego, or however you want to think about it, but this negativity that comes, the ego and is not concerned about being right, actually. So that's why the title or the topic of the video is other people being wrong rather than being right, because the ego in this way, and the pain bodies that create these stories, this narrative that is created by the mind, it's not concerned about being right. It's concerned about making something else wrong. And that process, if you like, is creating the ego. So by making something other, then it's reaffirming and reassuring that there is a self. Now that self there, the one that is this illusory self, this construct created from the narratives that we tell ourselves, that's the one that a, you know, a lot of people really identify with as themselves. And because those things aren't there, the story isn't there. The only thing that is consistent and is real is now, the present moment. And it's quite interesting. Any problem that you have will always have the same answer, the same resolution, and that is to observe it and be present, accept it. Just accept what is there, observe it. That's it. And it's interesting that this problem, if you like, of others being wrong, it generates negativity within us. That's the real issue with it, right? When we think that someone else is wrong, I suppose there can be that satisfaction that I spoke about earlier, where we feel good because we think we're right. But really, quite often when other people are wrong, it comes from a place of frustration. We're like, no, I'm right, they're wrong. Another example of these stories, if you like. This one's from a film, but I think it's quite accurate to life in a lot of ways. And the movie is called Her. If you haven't seen it, it's a great movie. I recommend it. And I won't give any spoilers in case you haven't seen it, but essentially there's a guy and a girl. And the girl says to the guy, isn't it funny how the past is just a story that we tell ourselves? Now, the guy in the movie, he is so wrapped up in this story, this construct of self and expectations of who he thinks he should be, things he thinks he should do, things that are gone that he wishes he had, and all these attachments and things that aren't there now, that he completely misses what she's trying to tell him and the wisdom in her words. And he just kind of, he's not purposely dismissive, but he is dismissive because he's not really paying attention. He just says, oh yeah, sure, or something like that. And I think, you know, there's kind of different ways you can think about this when it comes to other people being wrong, and in that way you being right. We as humans have such a limited perspective. We, at least I believe, have evolved not to see the world as it is. We've evolved to be able to survive. That's what evolution does, if you like. That's how the process of natural selection works. There's no plan necessarily. Eckhart Tolle thinks differently. Listening to him, he seems, you know, it's just my interpretation. I've never spoken to him directly, but he seems to think that there is this progression, at least of consciousness, towards something. And I can see that. I can see that there are changes, and I know that throughout my lifetime I've become more and more conscious, and I've seen that process taking place all around me as well. So who knows, maybe there's something there. But in terms of natural selection, it's not concerned with consciousness. It's not concerned with the truth of reality. It's just concerned, if you like, with survival of the fittest. There's no real thought. There is no thought to it. It's just that some things survive and other things don't. And in this way, there's no benefit to seeing reality as it is, because I feel that the self that we need to believe in order to strive for self-survival, it's an illusory construct. And if we really, or anyone, anything, saw the world as it is, it would have no real desire, no real necessity to preserve its own life, because it would understand this oneness and it would live in that. We as humans, we kind of tread almost the divide between oneness and separation. And I think that's there's a kind of a duality, if you like, not in the terms of the philosophical, but there's something to that seems to exist in everything that we perceive, in everything that we do. There's this base of separation and of illusion from that separation. So it's like, yin and yang, or the image of the snake chasing its own tail. There is one thing. Out of this one thing comes ignorance of separation, a kind of self-identification. I say ignorance because you need to believe in the separation in order for it to exist, in that sense, or at least the mind, right? So that's kind of where the mind comes from. The thinking mind comes from separation, the other and the self. And then that self is shaded with our ideas, and those ideas are built up through what we perceive, and our perceptions are based in ignorance. So that was a really long way of saying that we can never really be right. There's a passage in the Tao, I've got the book here, the Tao Te Ching. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. I'm actually going to start a series on this channel where I read a page of this. It's kind of, I don't know, they're not poems, they're like little entries, and each one I feel like has some wisdom in it. And I just feel like that's going to be interesting. So have a look for that if you're interested in such a thing. But there's the first passage in here. I haven't read the whole book. I've just had a little look at the beginning. The Tao that can be understood is not the eternal cosmic Tao, just as an idea that can be expressed in words is not the infinite idea. So I'll maybe I'll put that in the description so you can spend a bit more time with it. But I think there is wisdom in that, and there's more to that passage. But to me, that speaks of this idea that the way things really are cannot be mentally conceived. Mental perception in that way is born out of this ignorance, out of this divide that is an illusion in so many ways. It is both real and an illusion. So, and even in that, there's this ignorance and this duality. Any truth has its kind of counterpart, and yeah, I just think that if you can understand that at its base, that we are based out of this ignorance, even things that seem most true and most obvious to us, if they serve a genuine good purpose, we can use those, and we should use those, and we still need to interact and exist as humans, right? But in these situations when you're frustrated, so when these pain bodies come up and when there's this ignorance, frustration and anger, then in those moments the truth is even narrower. The truth that you're experiencing, the story that you're creating is even more tied to this even narrower sense of self, because not only is it still based in ignorance, but there's layers of ignorance on top of that. Because, for instance, the story we tell, if we're trying to explain that to someone else, why we are angry, for instance, you will pick and choose events that have happened to you rather than taking in the whole event. You will take information that is relevant to your story and ignore the rest. People live lives this way. They live their lives in these stories. They live their lives as, oh, I'm a guy who doesn't get anything that he wants, and that becomes a limiting belief. And the more he says that to himself, the more he believes it. But we can change that. that guy, if you're that guy or girl, you can change that. All you need to do is, repetition, and it works. So you just start telling yourself the opposite, and you will start to believe it, and your life will start to change. That's there's kind of more to that as well with the law of manifestation and the law of attraction. Now, I'm actually thinking again on this channel of doing potentially, because it's something that I've been practicing, that the law of attraction, and I want to kind of use myself as a guinea pig, because and I have been, but I haven't really been documenting it, so this is as good a place to start as any. The effects of it that I have noticed is that when you change your beliefs, your world, if you like, changes. Now, for instance, in my previous video I spoke about abundance and gratefulness. It runs off that theme, because if we are generating gratefulness and compassion in ourselves, we start to see the things that are good. And when we start to see the things that are good, in that way more good things happen to us. You know, this is the thing, there's so many layers to it, and who knows if there's something mystical, if there's something greater. But for sure there's practical application just in the belief, if we change our beliefs. And that changing our beliefs is at least what this channel is about. You know, that's why I started this channel, because in the past, if you don't know, I used to suffer from pretty bad depression. I mean, I was depressed for years and I didn't even know it. I just thought that's what life was, because it had been there since such a young age. And it's only in the last year or so, you know, I got out of the depression by doing things, and then it kind of just came to me one day. It just kind of clicked, like, oh, I was in control. Like, I was depressed because of the things I was doing. I wasn't not doing things because I was depressed, although there is this kind of chicken and egg and thing, you know, chicken and egg situation, like what causes what. But ultimately it doesn't matter, because it's how it affects you as a person, right? So it doesn't have to be that you have depression. It could be that you have anxiety. It could be just that you're a bit bummed out, you're not very happy. I want on this channel to give you so many tools, as many tools as I can, to understand what you're doing. If you're not happy and you feel bad, or you just feel not good in any way, let's grow this belief in ourselves that the reason for that is me, things that I've done. So linking back around to the kind of topic of this video, when other people are wrong and we're frustrated and we're angry, let's move the focus away from that. It doesn't matter even if we're right or wrong, because what is right and wrong anyway? But I mean, maybe in some situations, like, it depends on your job, maybe sometimes there's exceptions to this, but ultimately it doesn't really matter, because what are you trying to achieve? What's your goal? I want to do I'm just gonna breathe for a second, because I got quite excited, and I think it's good to leave space. Eckhart's teachings, leave space. I was going to go on there to talk a bit about another video idea that I have, but I guess that can wait for another video. It's basically of this idea of the futility of trying to get somewhere, right? So tying it back in, and I guess I've been rambling for long enough, to this idea of others being wrong. If you're trying to get somewhere, there is a futility in that, and I'll go into that in another video, because otherwise this one's going to go on forever. But when the trick is just to be present, right? And accepting of what is there. It's not serving us, it's not serving our happiness to be so identified with the mind and so adamant that not even that we're right, that someone else is wrong, but we are saying we're right. We're saying, yes, I not even us, but the ego is like, oh, I'm right. You're wrong. It's this. There's a need. There's a grasping there, and that is something that we don't need to associate with. Just letting go of that and just taking a step back can really just do a lot for you, because if you just try that process, maybe next time you find yourself thinking that someone else is wrong, just give that a bit of space. Just observe that, step back from it, maybe mentally, and just stand behind the idea and just let it drift away. What does it matter if they're wrong? How is that serving you? It doesn't matter. Just be present, and yeah, that's all you need in any situation, any problem. Be present, allow for the space that is around, if you like, all situations. Be the observing presence. Alright, so I hope you got something out of the video today. That's really what I want. I had a few ideas for YouTube channels, and this was the one that stuck. I really want to share these ideas that they're not all my ideas. Like I talk about Eckhart Tolle, I'm not trying to claim that I'm special. I just think these are things that at some point I didn't know, and if I could know them then they would have been a big help. And just like simply the idea of being in control of your happiness. I want you to believe that there's things that you can do, and there is. It doesn't need to be difficult. It's going to be as difficult as the story that you're telling yourself. So let yourself be present. Be grateful for what you have. And yeah, thanks for watching. See you soon.